Alright, welcome to a fucking sick ass video. We're doing some Yu-Gi-Oh! Doing top 15 archetypes that I hate. And that can be for various reasons. I'll explain as we go on why I hate these archetypes. And just because I hate them doesn't mean that if you play them I dislike you or think you're even degenerate for playing them. At least not in all cases. But rather I might just think they were poorly designed. Or I'm just tired of seeing them. Alright, number 15 is Invoked. You'll find a lot of these I find are fairly easy to beat, especially if you've seen my channel. If you've seen the videos I post for Master Duel. I play a lot of going second decks, and a lot of these decks which try to go first and try to put up really tough boards are super easy to break, especially with Kaijus. I think a lot of people just need to accept the fact that Kaijus are just a thing of the game now, and you should play at least like 2, maybe 3, because it makes it so easy to just win the game and go second. But the thing I hate about Invoked is that their resources continuously recur, they never go away, and it's just really frustrating because it feels like, oh, I outed your monster, I broke your board, and then you have nothing, but you get to keep adding this back and keep doing it again. I find that to be a poor design in terms of player interaction, because it makes what you're doing seem meaningless because they just keep getting their shit back and you can't do anything about it. It's not broken. Like, Invoke stuff's pretty easy to deal with and win against. But I almost called it a deck too, and that's one of the biggest problems with it. Is it's not a deck, it's a splashable engine. And that's one of the worst things in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think, is just generic splashable engines. If you're playing like fucking fire worms, and there's like a fire worm archetype, and you can put some of their cards in and it kind of works, it's a bit different. But when it's something that has no restrictions and you can just play it whenever, I don't think that's a good design, because it's prone to just being abused by other decks, where they should be expected to have a certain board set up, but then they can also just throw on another archetype's boss monster. I think that it's too easy to get carried away with that stuff. And it ultimately just makes better decks better, which I don't think is a thing that needs to happen in the game, especially if the decks are already better. Alright, number 2 is ABC. Not XYZ or VW. Don't give a fuck about those horrible cards. It's just the ABCs. And they have one thing which I absolutely hate in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is all of the cards saying if this card is sent to grave, activate effect, generally a +1, which is to recover from being sent to grave in most cases. I think this is, again, like I said about Alistair, just absolutely horrible design in terms of player interaction, because I'm going to want to get rid of your cards, but by doing so, you just get to do more things. It's so fucking annoying. ABC Buster Dragon was really, I think, a bit too much for the time when he first came out. Now he's perfectly fine and I don't care, but having a quick effect interruption like that was kind of new. Before that, people kind of just set up boards and then played into each other's boards continuously until someone lost. So not only that, but the fact that you only need them in grave, so it's really easy to set up. And the actual archetype itself ends up just becoming this abusable dump of put as many bullshit cards on the field as you can going first, which it's not impossible to play against, not at all. I almost strictly play going second decks, so I'm quite used to it, and it's what I expect to see when I play a game, but it's just not fun or interesting, and I don't think it's a smart game design to create an environment where players have to expect to go up against 3 or 4 interruptions out of nowhere. At the very least, a deck should be punished by doing that, by not having a follow-up play on the next turn or resources afterwards, but ABC does the opposite of this, where they almost always have resources available to them, especially with ABC Dragon Buster just popping in and out, bringing all of his cards back. I mean, if you don't have Kaiju, which, again, you're going to need Kaijus to deal with modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, then he's a fucking god of this game, because he's never around when you need him to be, and his stuff to bring him back is always there. The next one, you'll be fucking surprised by, is Chronomaly. And it's not because of any game design shit. I just, when I open a pack of cards and I see something that doesn't look like anything, and its effect is just complete bullshit, useless, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this? I hate seeing it. I opened 2 boxes of Dino Majesty, because I love Gustos, and I love, like, Syncars and Stardust and stuff. And I pulled 2 Chronomaly Vimana, which, now that I know what a Vimana is, actually this card is kind of cool, but when I'm pulling all these packs and I just see, like, this is like a Synchro theme kind of box in a sense. It has some other things like magic keys in there, but when I pull an XYZ, it has nothing to do with anything else in the pack. It doesn't look like anything. It's not like a creature or a person, and its effect is some like weird thing that doesn't seem to apply to anything else in the set or the game as I know it. It feels like pulling the biggest dud you can pull out of a pack. It's a Chronomaly card. That being said, I actually do think there's a lot of cool things about them, like the references to ancient mysteries. I just think it could have been handled better. Like, maybe instead of having, like, the Vidmon is alright, but like they have the Nebradisc and it's just the Nebradisc. What if it was like a soldier and his shield was the Nebradisc? It's like you guys gave up on step 1, was pick ancient mystery, make it into a Yu-Gi-Oh card. Oh wait, you forgot steps 3, 4, and 5, which was make it interesting, make it make sense, make it playable. So I just, Chronomalys are on here because they are the worst kind of pack filler, because they're pack duds. Next up is Dinosaurs, specifically like the whole Oviraptor structure deck bullshit, and I particularly dislike them because they came out alongside the Ancient Gear structure deck at the same time, and it's a complete joke, the power difference between the Ancient Gear structure deck and the Dinosaur structure deck. The Dino structure deck would be meta defining for fucking years to come. It's still a tier 2 deck at least. Meanwhile, the Ancient Gear one was not even like off the ground the second it came out. The biggest problem with Dinos is that they're too consistent, and I'm one to talk because I play Heroes. But if you have 3 Fossil Dig and 3 Oviraptor, and they're completely just one card full combo cards, it's a bit too much. Because normally when you fight a deck, you expect some variety in how they're going to set up their board or how they're going to fight you. But against Dinos, it's always the exact same linear path, and it's always going to lead into their one boss monster because it's just so easy to summon for them. Ultimately, they're not too high on the list because they're decently easy to fight against. Luckily, the ban list has sort of restrained them a little bit by limiting Misk, but funny enough, Misk is really the least important thing you could have hit. Hitting Oviraptor and or Fossil Dig would have made a lot more sense. As I mentioned earlier, with splashable engines, Dinos are able to do that with things like the Scrap Engine, which is kind of unfortunate because it means you have to fight against Dinos, which you would have been doing in the first place, but now you have to fight against extra like cards just thrown on the field out of nowhere. It's definitely feels unfair if you're playing the game from the perspective of any other deck. The good news is, even with all these free handouts, of course it's still kind of easy to deal with them, especially if you just play going second the way you should be playing going second in 2022, which is lots of Kaijus, Imperms, Chalices, because, you know, once Return Omni Negates or even Apollosa or quick effects at your field really mean nothing if you Lightning Storm them. Next up is Dark Magician, and I have no sympathy for this because they have had so many fucking cards and they're still just the scrubbiest fucking deck ever. And it's so annoying when it's like, yeah, here's a bunch of Dark Magician cards, and they're all extremely mediocre and clunky. And I'm just tired of seeing these cards. For real, please stop. Please stop printing Dark Magician cards. The worst thing about anything that they print these days is it's the ultimate Family Guy joke, where they'll just go, remember to the time when Yugi used his Gaia Knight to penetrate the Cocoon Moth? That's a card now. Back when they did it with Attack the Moon, it was a meme. And now it's transcended past memehood into just fucking annoying, and please stop printing these things. You see fucking any combination of Gen 1 Yu-Gi-Oh! That you could put together now. It's Red Eyes plus Dark Magician. It's Dark Magician plus Karibo for the fucking Pog hat. It's like, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has had nothing to do with Gen 1 Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything in the show since 2002, when the show was still airing. That's the funny thing about it, is Dark Magician is not Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Magician is the fucking anime and the manga. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so much more and so much better than Dark Magician, to the point where they're going to release hundreds of Dark Magician cards, and he's not even going to be able to keep up with this shit. Next up on the list is an archetype which I play almost all the time, and that's Kaijus, and I do hate them. They are a TCG exclusive archetype, and that's going to become a theme later on, that extremely poor card design is because of the TCG making their own cards. I genuinely think that they should just say that any card created by the TCG should not be recognized as an official card, it should not be tournament legal, because the The TCG is just exclusively designed very poorly, and they clearly don't understand the restraints that the OCG has put onto archetypes that make them reasonable. Kaijus are a big example of this because they completely redefined the game. Beforehand, you had a card that couldn't be targeted or couldn't be negated, and it was actually really hard to get rid of. Now Kaijus just laugh at that. I mean, I play Kaijus in all my decks. I play almost only going second decks. I get it. I recommend everyone play Kaijus in their decks. I'm just saying it's unfortunate that we're at this position. Not only that they exist, but that they kind of have to exist because of this game and what it's become. I think the biggest problem with Kaijus is that the OCG literally made Santa Claus, and it was like, that's going to be the Kaiju. It has inherent downsides. It has to be summoned in defense mode. It lets them draw a card if you don't kill it. And then CCG just completely knocked over the fucking design table and said, you know, we're just going to make that, but way more abusable, especially with only one card, Gamma Seal. It's the only one you're going to really see because it has the lowest attack points. It completely just erases any of the design behind Santa Claus and puts it in a way more accessible card. So it shows that the actual card game was planning to have something like this, but the TCG completely just fucking screwed it up. So, you know, shoutouts to Cosmo, who's not on the list because of how laughably easy it is to play against the deck, but also, you know, thanks to that deck, E-Telly was at 1 for such a long time, and I just want to play, you know, lower tier Psychic decks, but Cosmo, another extremely horribly designed TCG exclusive archetype, made it so that didn't happen. Next up is Dangers. Ring the bell for TCG exclusive archetype. You know, leave a like, leave a comment every time I mention a TCG exclusive card or archetype. Dangers I don't particularly care about now, especially because they're limited and the game has progressed from when they were first released, but the biggest thing about them is that when they first came out, they were what made an FTK so consistent that it was, I think it was tier 0. Literally a one-card FTK. The fact that you can just keep activating them in your hand if they get negated, that they combo with another archetype which already existed, but Konami didn't think perhaps, Konami TCG didn't think perhaps that, oh wait, Dark Rolls just make these way more consistent than they're supposed to be. And the fact that they're not an archetype that really plays the game, they just kind of roll dice until they have drawn 20 cards and put 5 cards on the field and just see what they can do with that. It's really not like playing a game. It really is like someone just gets a bunch of random stuff and sees what they get to play with. And it's not really fun to play against because you're not really playing against a person, you're just playing against pure luck. But really they're on here for how they interacted with the metagame and how their horrible design philosophy contributed to a horrible format as well as just a god-awful, abusable way to get through your deck. Next up is Salaman, not so great. And not only is their name completely fucking stupid, and not only is their artwork extremely devoid of creativity, just animal, light it on fire, done, but they are so annoying to play against. And the sad thing is that despite being so annoying to play against, they're really easy to beat, especially with Kaijus. And it goes all the way back to what I mentioned with ABCs and Invoked, where they're an archetype where you get rid of all their resources, they have nothing on field, and then they draw top deck and they have 5 summons that they can make. It's just ridiculous. And not only that, but the fact that they can completely recycle their counter trap over and over again, that they had to have so many cards limited to just be in a fair and balanced spot. Salad is really the fucking custom archetype of Konami, where somebody went and it's like if you go in the dueling book and you just make a bunch of cards and you're not even thinking about, oh, this one also summons, oh, this one also summons itself, this one also summons itself, and I gotta recycle this because I don't want to end up not having this card. And then you forget about the fact that this has to go into an actual game against other decks, against other players who are going to try to get rid of these cards, who won't be able to. It's just sad that when you play against Salad, you have to completely rearrange your strategy, which is totally possible, but it shouldn't have to be. That you have to completely disregard what was a key element of the game, such as resource management and resource usage, for like 15 years, just because a couple decks came out that completely disregarded that themselves, and the only way to beat them is to just essentially just play awkward cards that completely ignore the things that make the decks like Salad so good against what used to be important in the game. Really is what transformed the game from being something more of an interactive skill-based game into more of a sacky game, because all you can do is play cards that sack, cards that can't be stopped, cards that don't destroy or target, and just try to cheat your opponent of the field they had to try to win before they can recover. Alright, this one is not TCG exclusive, but it sure acts like one, and that's Shadow. Shadows, I think, are really weak as an archetype, especially now because they're so slow. But when they came out, they completely rearranged the game, like I was talking about before. Where before resource management, going plus, all that stuff mattered. And then one deck comes out that does that all so much better, and then their monsters are basically immune to what every other monster was at the time, that it completely shifted what Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to be in order for it to work, in order for you to play the game. And that's why I really say the game died at Duelist Alliance, and that's where I call it Yu-Gi-Oh! From there on. I mean, you can talk about classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Dying somewhere a little bit after GOAT, which is fine. You know, that Luxac top deck into Broken Spells Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be the original Yu-Gi-Oh! But the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! That people mostly remember playing, the actual card game, not the manga or the TV show that people remember, that was much more resource advantage, one-for-one trading, going into extra deck monsters that didn't have a lot of power, but just happened to be useful as a tech in certain situations. And Shadows completely changed the game on that one. Extra deck monsters now were stun. If they left the field in any way whatsoever, you got to recover. Not only that, but your most important card, which completely preys on the fact that all decks were using extra deck monsters at the time, and even still really are, to the point where you can go +2 and summon your fusion for free off of one card, which you recover infinitely. Shadows really is like the archetype made by that kid who can't win on his own, but wants to make his own cards so that way he can finally have a chance to win, and this is what he comes up with. Next up, hit that sub button for another TCG archetype. It's Burning Abyss. Came out in Duelist Alliance as well in the TCG. The TCG was really on a fucking roll back then of making TCG exclusive cards that were really balanced. Fun fact, Artifact Scythe was also a TCG exclusive from that era. Again, not an OCG card. TCG made this thing. So Burning Abyss adheres to everything I said before, where if you remove their cards, you didn't actually remove anything, they just get their resources back. The funny thing about them is that even though they can play a grind game where they infinitely recur resources, they can also just kind of spam all their things out, which is kind of funny to me that it's such a poorly designed archetype that it doesn't even have to stick to one strategy. It can just abuse whatever strategy is more relevant to helping them win at the time. Again, I don't really hate this one because I think it's like hard to play against or anything. And in fact, none of these are. I hate these archetypes, so I spent time figuring out how to play against them. And as a result, I really don't care about fighting them anymore because I find it very easy to fight them now that I know what to do. But I dislike them because of what they've done to the game, and because of the design around them and how you're supposed to play around them has no semblance of how the game was for so long. It's funny that in the year of Duelist Alliance, Worlds was not won by Shadows or Burning Abyss, but by Tellarknight, and that's probably because Burning Abyss, I'm just guessing, couldn't compete because it's a TCG exclusive archetype, which is really funny to say that the meta is so shaped by what I would call an accident, because let's face it, the TCG should not be designing tier 1 archetypes. It's completely against the design of the game given to them from the OCG. I mean, the TCG-OCG divide doesn't even need to exist anymore, but that's a completely different fucking video. Why don't you think about that one in the meantime? Next up is Zodiac, because they created probably the least fun Tier 0 format to ever play in. And it's just because at the time having a quick effect destruction, also one that comes from literally having any one of their monsters, and that is put on top of combos that would literally make them go well over +10 off of one card. It's just like, you don't play against that. You draw max C or you surrender if you're actually trying to win in that format. Which was really unfortunate because I just wanted to play the game. I didn't want to have to play against this. I didn't want to have to play in this format. I just wanted to play the game Yu-Gi-Oh! But because of the ban list and because of the cards that they were releasing at the time, I had to play this game. A completely different game. In retrospect, I had other stuff going on in life, so if I had more freedom, or really just more... if I had the experience that I have now, I probably would have been able to play against Zodiac a lot better and probably wouldn't have minded as much, but it was really demoralizing to have to see that be a Tier 0 deck for an entire format and to just have no chance of winning against it with any deck. Next up is, well, technically I put Zephyra, but this is Pendulum as a whole, and the reason why it's there is because Pendulum is the worst designed mechanic, because it is inherently extremely bad as a mechanic, because you need 2 specific cards of their scales in order to use them. They're inherently negs until they're not. So, by design, Pendulum is a fucking bad mechanic, And the only way you can make a bad mechanic good is to make their cards busted. The same thing's true for Ritual, but Ritual's a bit easier to deal with because typically all they do is be really consistent and go into like a negate or two, which Kaiju's really good against. But Pendulums have the problem, or at least really had the problem, of recurring resources, which thankfully the MR4 revision, aka Master Rule 5, fixed because they realized Pendulums shouldn't be unlimited from the extra deck like the other mechanics were. The other thing about Pendulums, and even though I said the archetype technically is Zephyra, but if you look at Zephyra, it's playing a bunch of different cards, a bunch of different archetypes, and that's because Pendulum as a mechanic is so bad. The only way to play it is to play every good Pendulum card, so that ultimately means that Pendulum decks are there's about, like, what, 2 Pendulum decks, really, if you count the OCG ones, because they have Zephyra, we have Endymion, and it's just every good Pendulum card you can possibly play. Which is unfortunate because the limitations or restrictions on those cards were designed to be when they were used with each other, but because you're using them with other groups of cards, you're bypassing that, and you're getting to a point that clearly wasn't what they designed it for you to be able to do with that archetype. When people say a Pendulums made them quit the game, clearly they just meant they quit around Pendulums, because Pendulums themselves didn't do anything until the end of their own era. They were completely useless up until the end, because they needed to have so many cards they were busted in order to compete, because like I said, it's not a good mechanic by design. It's actually quite a bad mechanic. So I think that Pendulum as a whole is just really something that Konami should try to forget about. Leave it to the scrubs, people who really like Arc V and Odd Eyes. Yeah, let them play a fucking monster in their spell trap zone and laugh it up all they want, but as far as the actual game is considered, let's just leave them in the past. You guys didn't do a good job designing them. They never really were part of the game, and they don't really need to be part of the game, so let's just move on and forget about them. Next up, I will call it the Synonym archetype, because it's pot of greed, pot of fucking whatever, jar of cum, I don't care. And this is an interesting one. You probably wouldn't have thought of it as an archetype, or that I might have put it on the list. I don't think that the archetype is a very good archetype, as it's outside of 2 cards, Pot of Avarice and Pot of Duality. So Avarice requires you to put monsters back to draw 2, but it requires you to put so many monsters back that in normal situations, some decks excluded, putting 5 back to draw 2, you're focusing more on the fact that you're putting 5 back. You can't just put this in your deck and expect to play it as a card to draw 2 with. And I kind of think that's a nice thing for decks to be able to have access to, is a way to put their monsters back. Some decks just use them way too quickly. Duality restricts you from special summoning, so it's very clear right off the get-go that no one's abusing this to do some horrible thing. And it's really just for rogue decks, or for back when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a more civilized time, and you could spend a turn not special summoning and not OTKing and still win the game. And I really like that consistency boost it gives to decks in formats where we're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Rather than just trying to play Solitaire v Solitaire and see who wins first. The problem with them sort of starts with Desires, but Desires isn't that bad. It's really the other ones where it's fine to have an idea of like a consistency booster card, like, oh, we're going to take a classic card like Pot of Greed and retool it for the new game, which is to let people look for the combo pieces they want to play the game, which I'm fine with, but the real problem is the ones that let you like excavate the top of deck, or that have no cost for certain kinds of decks, especially burn decks or alternate win condition decks, because when you can look at the top 6 cards of your deck and pick one of your alt-win cards, especially alt-win conditions outside of Exodia, because Exodia is not really the best alt-win condition, then what you've done is you've taken a card that was intended to, I'm assuming this wasn't intended just to boost alt-win conditions. This card was intended to just make maybe decks that didn't rely on extra deck or special summoning or doing damage a little bit more consistent, and now you're just making alt-win conditions more consistent. And ultimately, I don't think we need a generic spell to make decks more consistent like that. I think that either we can lay off the combos a bit and maybe try to play some Yu-Gi-Oh! Variety in the duels that we play, where sometimes you don't combo off completely and you do something else. Or if consistency is needed, leave it to specific archetypes with specific restrictions. When you get generic consistency cards like this, they end up being used by things that aren't what we would call decks per se. Really, they're more just really, they may as well just be known as FTKs, because it's just trying to get to an alt-win con before the opponent can do anything. And in which case, you really aren't playing Yu-Gi-Oh! People say, like, against Floodgates you don't get to play or whatever, but if you literally don't even have a chance to use any cards, like not even a Kaiju, not even an out, you can't even draw the out, because, let's face it, we're not running Haniwatha, we're not running Penguin Knight to have an out to being decked out or being burned, then really we aren't playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which it is just a game of solitaire. Next up is Neospatian. And I absolutely hate this archetype because I love heroes, and because really 3/4 of GX, Jaden becomes obsessed with playing these Neospatians, and I don't give a fuck about Jaden, don't really like him that much, but because I like heroes and because he plays heroes, so much of heroes have become intertwined with Neospatians in Konami's mind, which means there's a huge fucking pile of useless cards that combine the two that I don't want to play. It's got nothing to do with me playing the game. I'm playing heroes here, not Jaden. I'm not Jaden. I know some people want to be the anime protagonist. That's fine. You can go do that, but I don't want to play Neospatians. I don't want Neospatians to be associated with heroes. I don't have any interest in playing 6 monsters with really bad effects. I may as well be vanillas. Not to mention that the art style is fucking bad on them. The only good one is Panther, because he's a little cat with a cape, and that's cool. It's kind of neat, though, to see Neos be removed from Neospatians. First of honest Neos, it's just saying straight up, hey, it boosts hero cards. There's no Neospatians involved here. And as Spirit Neos, while it kind of laughing, jokingly says, oh, we could do some Neospatian stuff, I might summon the OG Neos. It's a hero card, man. It searches a card that lists a hero in the text, and it helps me make fucking Neos Wingman, which is pretty sick. I've been playtesting, so hyped for that. It's going to be so much fun. Before we go to number 1, let's do honorable mentions to Blue Eyes for the same reasons I said about Dark Magician. BLS, because you are bastardizing a very good card on the beginning by printing cards that are much worse than it, and it's just sad to see. Gimmick Puppets, because I love to hate them. I actually don't think it's a bad thing that I hate looking at them. I think that's the point, and I kind of like it. Gaia Knight, for everything I said about Blue Eyes and BLS. Alright, and the most hated archetype, number 1 on the list, is actually another hero-related archetype. It's evil heroes, and that's because if you're evil, how are you a hero? I fucking hate it, man. But no, for real, it's when that stuff came out, it completely contradicted how heroes played before by restricting you into darks. Really, there's sort of a divide I see. And if you look at my videos, you see the kind of hero decks I play. It's elemental heroes. It's all the attributes. I sort of see that in dark heroes. It's like the Destiny heroes, evil heroes, master heroes as being their own thing. And I'm fine with that. It's like I'm not playing the dark heroes. You can play the dark heroes if you want, but I'm playing my heroes. And the reason why they're on there is because now I can't say that I play heroes without people thinking that I play that. And any talk about heroes is about the dark heroes, and it's got nothing to do with the deck that I think is actually... I actually do think it's a better deck. It's got way more versatility. The kinds of outs it has are really unexpected. It's a really creative way to get to your outs as well. You can kind of find a way to get out of anything if you try hard enough. But dark heroes are super linear instead. So ultimately I see an archetype which is just a collection of convenient cards that are decent together versus something that represents what heroes have always been. And I would say still are, and are going to be more so, especially with cards like Neo's Wingman coming out. I think dark heroes are definitely a thing that will be forgotten, especially as we get more heroes that aren't dark, that kind of deck can't really summon if it's locked into darks or locked into certain kinds of things, which I think is good. We can leave the dark heroes in the past like we should have with the original evil hero lineup, if you remember those. And, they were kind of a fun little thing on the side, but we didn't need more Konami. We didn't need to bring back evil heroes. That was kind of like when in GX everything becomes evil and dark for a bit. It was fucking dumb, very late 2000s edgy. Nobody needed that at all, dude. All right, well that's 15 archetypes that I hate. Top 15 archetypes that I hate. I don't know, very loosely organized. Keep in mind that I'm not even complaining about these decks, really. Like I said, I spent time figuring out how I could beat them, so I could beat them. And I feel like it's very easy to beat them, knowing how to. I just think that the way they were designed and the way they impacted the game was just bad overall. And all of them kind of contributed in a way to erasing a kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was celebrated from like roughly 2008 to 2014-15. A kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! That doesn't seem like it's ever going to come back and is gone because of these kinds of decks. And a kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! That relies on certain skill sets that isn't present in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Particularly like resource usage and management, and being able to outplay your opponent by choosing to do one thing instead of the other, whereas today you just do everything you can do. Well, this was definitely off the top of my head. I didn't bother to write anything down. This was all just spur of the moment stuff. If you disagree with me, leave it in the comments. Maybe I'll even end up agreeing with you. It's not like I'm too really attached to these thoughts. I mean, heck, I put Evil Heroes as number 1. I could, like I said, they're pretty forgettable. Maybe I mean, there's stuff I didn't put on here because I didn't think they were worthy of being talked about, but,